Let's sit tall. Close the eyes. And give yourself the opportunity to settle in, to become grounded. Place the right hand on the heart, left hand on the belly. And together we'll lift our voices in one Om, followed by the invocation mantras. If you know them, please join. Taking a breath in for Om. Om. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Hari Om. Ganana Antva Ganapati Gum Havamahe Kavin Kavinam Upamashravastamam Jesterajam Brahmanan Brahmanaspata Anasharinvanuti Basidha Sadhanam Mahaganapataye Namaha Prano Devi Saraswati Vajebhir Vajini Vati Dhinama Vitriyavatu Anu Devo Brahataf Parvatada Saraswati Ajata Gantu Yagnyam Havan Devi Jujoshana Gritachi Shagman Nova Chamushati Shrinotu Vagdevyai Namaha. And gently releasing the hands down. Is there a topic that you would like to talk about today? You can always ask. Okay. Let's talk about, boy, what haven't we covered in a little while? Let's talk about the difference between spirituality and spiritual bypassing and see kind of where that takes us to. You've all heard the term spiritual bypassing. So spiritual bypassing, if I was going to put a definition to it, would be to say that there's a misunderstanding, significant misunderstanding about what spirituality entails. There's an idea that everything should be comfortable, easy for the most part. People shouldn't get in your way. Circumstances should be easily resolvable. And if you don't talk about the difficulty, it'll go away. There's also another component of spiritual bypassing where it's a sense of false superiority, like a sense of, well, I'm enlightened and the rest of you aren't, and so I'm just going to sit over here and have my judgments and just pretend to be all peaceful. Even if they don't know that that's what they're doing. But that's spiritual bypassing. Spiritual bypassing is refusing to take on the responsibility of your own spiritual path because you think it should be something different. And isn't that just the crux of yoga, though? It's like yoga teaches us over and over and over again, nothing is what you think it is. Everything is changing all the time. And the moment that you identify something, you become attached to it. And that most of those attachments are actually unhealthy. And so when we become attached to the idea that I'm enlightened, I'm awakened, I'm special somehow, that immediately becomes an issue. Because the human mind is a mind that likes to justify. So if I'm going to make a blatant statement like that, then I have to look for proof. And the only place where you're going to find proof of superiority is if you can find something that's inferior. So the person, the ego, looks out and says, well, that one's inferior and that one's inferior. And look at the behavior on that one. That one's obviously inferior. Oh my gosh, I really am special. So spiritual bypassing on that level of it, where it influences us to become judgmental, to have a worldview that is not based in reality, that is not based in the difficult work that's meant to be had on this path. That's unhealthy. That's so very unhealthy. And yet it's what's pushed in the spiritual world today, commercially speaking, When commercialism is the primary concern, that's what's pushed in the world today. Here, if you buy these $150 Lululemon pants, you're going to feel really great about yourself, And then they show you a picture of some model who's like got her foot behind her head, who's not sweating a single little bit. And there's some kind of a psychological connection that's made there. Like, well, if I have those pants, and if I believe that I'm awakened, then maybe I won't have the discomfort that my practice usually brings me, or that life usually brings me. But the reality is that the spiritual path is messy. It's chaos. It's up and down. It's fall down and stand back up. It's get knocked down and stand back up and just get knocked down again. It's losing your breath. It's all kinds of stuff. And that's actually part of the beauty of it. When we walk through this life in a state of constant ignorance of what this life actually is, those types of things dishearten us. Things don't turn out our way one time. We don't get the job, we don't get the car, we don't get the partner. And all of a sudden we think everything is done. Everything is over. Life is like that, right? We wake up in the morning and our cap of our toothpaste goes down the drain, and first thing we think is, it's going to be one of those days. What is those days? What is that? What does that even mean? It's like, but we all say it, every single one of us. So we have this false impression that life should somehow be easy, when in fact, caps to toothpaste are always going to go down the sink drain, and you're going to always have to call the plumber for something, and you're sometimes not going to get the outcome that you wanted, and sometimes you're going to get the exact opposite outcome of what you wanted. Sometimes you're going to be super, super uncomfortable. But that's the process, is learning how to be with that, how to be with the discomfort, how to be with the changeability of life, and maintain a sense of inner peace. To some degree. It doesn't have to be perfect peace. It doesn't have to be like the absolute crystalline clear, not moving surface of the lake. There can be a little ripple now and then. That's fine. You're human. You're going to have that. But you don't want there to be a tsunami in the middle of your lake. Like, there doesn't need to be one. You don't need to have waves crashing all the time. That's unhealthy also. So this idea of spiritual bypassing and how it leads us to such dire disappointment, such unhealthy perspective, and also it leads us in deep into suffering. Into the suffering where we're actually making our own volatile waves. I'm constantly reading something, and I don't remember what it was I was reading yesterday. Just a little essay that some teacher wrote. It might have been Sai Baba. I'm not sure. I've been looking back into that, and a friend had given me a while back, who was a Sai Baba devotee, had given me a book that Sai Baba wrote that was blessed by Sai Baba and handed specifically to him by Sai Baba. And I said, why would you give that to me? It's such a gift for you. He said, because I'm meant to pass it on, and I can't think of a better place than the ashram, to have that. So, but anyway, so he said, basically, you are the creator of your own problems. There is no one else responsible. It's only you. It's only ever been you. It'll only ever be you. So then we can add to that and say, so instead of becoming the creator of your own problems or maintaining that illustrious title, how about we become the creator of our own solutions? We become the creator of our own solutions. There was a little documentary on this morning about, did the Irish monks come to America before the Pilgrims? It's an archaeological thing. Because in the Northeast, they have these underground chambers that were built that predate the pilgrimages that came here from England and whatnot. They predate Columbus, you know. And the way that they're built is extremely similar to the way that such things were built in Ireland. So they're hypothesizing that the Irish were here much sooner than what was anticipated for the Pilgrims, by several hundred years perhaps. So those people, when they got here, right? I think they probably had an expectation, that they might arrive, that maybe they would, find abundance, they would find food. They'd be able to take care of themselves. If they hunted, they'd be able to hunt. And I don't know if they thought really that they would have to dig a hole in the ground in order to make, a place for them to live safely. Or perhaps it was a place for them to pray safely. But that's what it is. It's like it's these caverns in the ground that they built stones up around. Big stones that, like, I wouldn't be trying to move one of those, So I just wonder if, like, the imposition of having to do that kind of work when they landed in this new area, which was lush and green, and they were probably all full of excitement, and then they're like, oh, crap, we have to build something now to keep us safe. We have to build a place where we can pray. I wonder how they reacted to that. I wonder if they thought they were too superior for it. Or if they thought that, it wasn't worth their time because the world should provide them with more. Or if back in that day, they just accepted it as part of life. They got in a boat, they took a boat ride, it brought them somewhere new that had not potentially been explored by their community. And in order to survive, to live, to thrive, they had to do the necessary work of building habitations, houses, whatever. And boy, that word left me real quick. But building something that they could live in, that they could pray in, that they could gather in. And it was just part of their life. So when did the change come? That doing the work stopped being part of our life and started being a great imposition. Something that we want to feel different about. Does that make sense? Because you look back in time, all the earlier cultures, I have never really read, even up until maybe, more recent times, like the 50s perhaps, when anthropologists found one of those indigenous groups that had never been contacted before. It doesn't seem like in populations that are not as complicated as industrial populations are, that these smaller indigenous groups, that there's a sense of like superiority, spiritual bypassing. I don't want to do the work. I don't want to be inconvenienced. I mean, human frustration is human frustration, but for the most part, what you read about and what people tend to encounter is community. We got to build a temple. Let's get together and build a temple. We got to build a hut so that we're safe, or some kind of a structure. Let's get together and do this. This is part of our responsibility. This is part of kind of an earthly dharma that we have, is to take care of ourselves, take care of our family, take care of our community, to be good citizens of that community. But then we jump up to the modern day, to 2024, and all of a sudden, it's, well, I don't have any problems because I practice yoga and I'm spiritually uplifted and enlightened, and That's really a mentality that's out there. And it's a problem. It's a problem. If anything, your yoga practice should humble you. You get on that yoga mat or you get on that meditation cushion and you face the fact that it is not easy. It is not easy to sit for 5 minutes or for an hour or for 3 hours. It's not easy to do it every day. It's not easy to sit there and to chant 1,080 repetitions of a mantra. It's not easy to do that. Your voice might get a little sore. Your back might start to ache. Your knees might start to complain to you. But you keep doing it. Because the discomfort humbles you. But also, if you have the appropriate relationship with the discomfort, it empowers you to build confidence in yourself and in your capability, in your own ability to sit, to practice, to be, to see life as it is, to accept the difficulty of the work. And for no other reason than that's what you're here to do. That's what we're all here to do. Does that make some sense? Yeah. You have a thought, I can tell. Do you have a question or a reflection?
Well, I have two. I did not know the term spiritual bypass. So, is it a form of arrogance then, as opposed to humility that you're talking about, or is it something else in our nature that we all tend toward, as opposed to being truly spiritual? I'm assuming, is that the opposite?
Yeah, it's a really great question. I think that it is arrogance, but I don't think that it's arrogance like cold hard arrogance, like it's a decision that's made. You know, like there are some people who are arrogant because that's the way they want to be, you know, and like they make this decision and it's a conscious decision. I think it's a fear-based arrogance. I think that people have become so disenfranchised by some things in the world today. They become disenfranchised by large organized religion. They become disenfranchised by government. They've become fearful of sending their children to school. I mean, you know, we're only a week in, and how many have there already been shootings? So many of them. And so I think that people have a fear. And when you can't hold on to the anchor that you could hold on to before any longer, because it's just not playing out to be stable enough to support you, you grasp for another anchor. And I in the day and time that we live in, and with the hype that has been built up around yoga, commercially speaking, I think that it has become a convenient anchor. Not just yoga, but I think yoga, Reiki, shamanism, all of them. You know, whatever that is, all of those holistic practices, there's been such a commercial hype that's built up around them, and so many people trying to make a living at doing it. And it's an issue because it's okay to try to make a living at it. That's okay, but you can do whatever you want to do. But perhaps it's not ethical to apply typical capitalistic, commercialist approaches to selling something like spirituality. Perhaps it's not ethical because it provides a false anchor. People make promises that they can't keep. People offer things that they actually shouldn't be offering. So, and the reason why I said actually shouldn't be offering is because, you know, training, there's very little licensure when it comes to spirituality. Some states are starting to crack down on things like yoga therapy, but very few, very, very few. Out of all 50 states, I think there's like 4 currently that actually say if you're going to be a yoga therapist, you have to obtain accreditation from a state certified school, and you have to, you know, do a certain number of CEUs every year. And so you have to show that you have this ability to put your hands on people, to move them, to shift them, to work with their diseases and their illnesses. But in most states, it's completely not regulated at all, and anybody could call themselves a yoga therapist. So it's so easy to fall into that title, whether it's yoga therapist or Reiki master or whatever. You're expected to be in an honor system. You've done your homework. You've done your training. You waited how long before you went into your next level?
I was attuned in 2016, and I just became a master 3 weeks ago.
Why'd you wait so long?
Because I didn't think it was right to jump the gun. I went from 1 to 2 very fast, and I felt like I missed steps.
Yeah.
So I wanted to be ready.
Now, that mentality is the mentality that we all need to have with regard to so many different things. Don't jump the gun and take the easy road. Just because someone offers it to you doesn't mean that it's the right thing to be doing. But there's that fear because the other thing or things that we would hold on to have fallen through. We don't feel connected to church anymore. We don't feel connected to a government to some degree anymore. We don't feel connected to something. The relationship fell through. The employment fell through. Whatever it happens to be. And now, here's this. And it's making me feel important. It's making me feel like I matter. And now I'm afraid of losing this. So I really have to prop myself up and seem important. So I think that it's a fear-based arrogance. Or a fear-based ignorance, one or the other. Yeah, it's a great question. Really great question. What was your second question?
I think I kind of came around to it, or you did, whether or not I was understanding the opposite nature of this. So you're saying spiritual bypass is something that even the most devoted will be have to be on the lookout for.
Absolutely.
And
mm-hmm.
People who put themselves out there to as knowing something or being able to do something for other people are vulnerable to that kind of a
absolutely
thing. Or you're talking more about the followers or the
both
leaders? Yeah.
Both, absolutely. Absolutely. Every single one of us. Great question again. Every single one of us are susceptible to it. We always have to check ourselves. And we always have to be mindful about who is it that I'm getting involved with here. And the number one way to do that is ask. Someone tells you, I can do this for you. Well, first of all, when they say, I can do this for you, that to me is a bit of a red flag. Because I can't do anything for you. You got to do it. I can suggest some things. I can guide you in a direction. I can provide you with some inspiration. But you have to be the one to do the work. So the moment that somebody says, I can do this for you, I can heal you, that's a red flag. Then the first thing I want to know after that is, where'd you go to school? Who's your teacher? Well, I don't have a teacher. I taught myself. Nope. Bye. Because that's not cool. In this day and age, you don't know, I don't know if it's true or not. And most of the time, 99%, it's not true. The ignorant cannot teach themselves. And that's, we can't find our way out of a dark room by darkness. It just doesn't work that way. The other thing that I want to know is if they do say that they belong to some kind of a lineage, some kind of an ongoing teaching community, I want to know a little bit more about it. I want to talk to them about it. And I don't want to be going out and offering things if I am not able to say, this is my lineage, these are my teachers, this is who they are, this is where they come from, this is how they practice, this is how they study, this is what they offer, and this is what I have permission to offer. So very interesting. Somebody asked me a while back, like a couple of years ago, before COVID, she was visiting the ashram, and she said to me, so your spiritual name, did you just like give it to yourself? Can I give it to myself? This was before Swamini. This was before I took my vows. And I said, no, I did not give my spiritual name to myself. There's no written law that you can't give yourself a name. But a spiritual name, a nama diksha, comes from a teacher. It's something it's an honor that's given to you, that the teacher gives you this name. You can request it, but it comes from the teacher. And then it has a different meaning, But if I name myself something, Devi Shakti or something, because it's a pretty name and I like the way it flows. But what does it really mean for me? What is it inspiring in me? When a teacher gives a name, there's a reason for it. There's a reason, even if the student doesn't understand what that reason is, the teacher does. So everything is permission oriented. It's earned. And that's something else too, is that, in the world today, there's really a lot of not earning a rite of passage. Before we opened this ashram, I sat down with my Guruji and had a conversation with him. Long time before we opened this ashram, when we first started looking for buildings. I went to him and I said to him, Swamiji, I feel so called to develop an ashram in the States. And he said, then do it. And I said, well, wait a minute. What do you mean, do it? He goes, well, go ahead. You can do that. And I said, well, how can I do that? What gives me the right to do that? I'm a middle-aged white woman. I'm not born in India. I said, are you sure? And he goes, yes, absolutely. I said, you have my blessing. Go do it. So you ask for permission for some things. Right now, I have people who want to learn certain practices from me, but I'm not initiated into that lineage. But I am now initiated into that lineage, and I'm now following the process myself of a particular lineage so that I can teach that lineage. Because to just go and read a book and say, well, hey, here, I read this book, I can tell you what to do, it's not appropriate. But in spiritual bypassing, that's what happens. The book appears to be enough because it's got information, it's got colorful ceremonies and rituals, and so it's very easy to go out, pick some flowers and call it Sri Vidya. But is it Sri Vidya or is it not? And Sri Vidya is a very closed lineage, and everything is permission-based there. So I hope I'm answering you. Yeah. So with the teacher, it's very important. And it's very important for the student. And the teacher should be teaching the student how to be discerning. So not to just take things at face value. And that's really what yoga is, right? Like one of the major teachings is don't take things at face value. Because if you take things at face value on the impulse, you're going to become attached to things that you should be letting go of. And you're going to let go of things that you should be attached to. Not attached, but that you should be holding on around you for a little while, learning from, working through. So the teacher should be instilling that in the student, letting them know different ways that they can work through attachment, different ways that they can become more independent and radically self-responsible. Super important for all of us. And nobody is just a teacher or just a student. So I know this is kind of cliche at this point in time because everybody's like, oh, I'm my best student and I'm my best teacher. You're probably your worst student, and you might be in moments your best teacher. Because it's like you're the worst patient in the world. We're also the worst student in the world sometimes to ourselves. So, but you are both. You are, because you're the one who's always with you. You're the one you're always listening to. So you're the one who's always teaching yourself. You teach yourself what to hear, what to ignore. You teach yourself what to appreciate and what to, disregard. You teach yourself what to love and what to hate. Certainly there's an influence from culture and from familial, experiences and whatnot. But ultimately, you teach yourself what needs to continue and what needs to change. So for all of us, we do really well when we look at those tendencies that we have as an inner teacher and as an inner student. And in a humble way, we face our responsibilities and our shortcomings. We learn how to be more responsible for our own happiness as well as for our own suffering. We learn how to make the changes necessary to reduce the unnecessary suffering so that we have more energy for the suffering that is necessary. And to rewrite those beliefs that are outdated, unreal, untrue, to rewrite them, to try to learn to live a different way, a more holistic way, a more complete way, a way that's more in line with the integrity of our heart versus the chaos of our ego. So I guess that's where this talk is going today, is to say we have these two potentialities at a minimum in the world today. There's spiritual bypass and there's spirituality. A necessary ingredient in spirituality is humility, true humility, sincerity. Swami Shivananda did the 18 Ittis. Let me see if I can find them for you very quickly, because these are amazing. And they're a path in life that you can follow. And I always forget a couple of them. So I want to read them to you so that I get them all correct. So Swami Shivananda, who was the father of the Shivananda lineage that I have taken my sannyas vows in, he lived in the 1800s, and through the mid-1900s, he passed away in 1963. And he was known to be a walking saint, a living saint. He wrote well over 360 books in his life. He started free hospitals in India that supported people from, the tribal communities as well as the cities. He was just, the potential of the humanity within him was amazing, amazing. So he wrote this down. He wrote things in such a succinct way so that it's easy for us to follow, and sometimes easy to memorize if you have a good memory like that. But here's his little poem called The Song of the 18 Ittis. Serenity, regularity, absence of vanity, sincerity, simplicity, veracity, equanimity, fixity, non-irritability, adaptability, humility, tenacity, integrity, nobility, magnanimity, charity, generosity, purity. Practice daily these 18 Ittis. You will soon attain immortality. Brahman is the only real entity. Mr. So-and-so is a false non-entity. You will abide in eternity and infinity. You will behold unity in diversity. You cannot attain this in the university. You can only attain this in the forest university. I have goosebumps. Yeah. Isn't it beautiful? So now, I can send this to all of you, and you could make a little poster of it and hang it on your refrigerator. You can make a little list of check boxes and be like, practice humility today, practice sincerity today. Yes, absolutely, right? It's a recipe for spirituality. It's exactly what it is. It's telling you that these are the things that we have to cultivate within ourselves, not within other people, because you can't. Aloe is such a beautiful child. She really is. So Niranjana and her partner Alan, their daughter Aloe, she's so wonderful. How old is she now?
She just turned 5.
She's turned 5. Oh my gosh. You can't make her the person she's going to be. Not now, not then, not ever. She has to make herself the person she's going to be. And what you and Alan do is you inspire her to find the goodness within herself and to embrace that versus the alternative. How do you do that? You practice those 18 Ittis. and you teach her them. You teach her the 18 intis. And imagine what it would be like if all we did was teach each other these beautiful qualities, these beautiful tendencies and behaviors, instead of teaching each other how to ridicule each other, how to gossip about each other, how to hate each other, how to judge each other. Imagine what this world would be like if these 18 ittis were the guiding path that we all live by. And here's the thing. On a level unknown to us, or unrealized perhaps by us, they are the foundation. They are the foundation of Christianity. They are the foundation of the Jewish religion. They are the foundation of Hinduism. They are foundation of Buddhism. They are the foundation of every ism. They are. Where did they go? Where did they go? When did they become overwritten by spiritual bypassing? When did they become overwritten by disconnection, by fear, by loathing? They did. And one of the reasons for that is because there has been, in recent years, a great exodus from organized religion. And it's bigger than a lot of people think it is. People still go to church and whatnot, but there's more people who aren't. And what happened is when many people walked away from the church, they threw the baby out with the bathwater. They said, I don't want anything to do with it. The problem is the teachings aren't the church. The teachings aren't necessarily the temple. The church is supposed to be a sanctuary that you can go to be safe and to learn about the teachings. So when you go to this place where you're thinking you're going to be safe to learn about the teachings of your tradition, and then you're not safe there on some level, you think the teachings are to blame. The teachings aren't to blame. The people are responsible for the behavior. The people who hurt people are responsible for the behavior. The teachings of generosity and serenity and humility, these teachings are the most valuable thing that you can carry forward in your life. So don't throw them away just because you're pissed off at your church or your temple or whatever you happen to call that the facility that you go to or the tradition that you belong to. Don't throw out the ethics, because when you throw these ethics out, you know what takes their place? The opposite. Right? So what are the opposites? All right, well, serenity's opposite is what? Chaos. Regularity's opposite is what? Yeah, unpredictability of a questionable kind, right? And that can lead to lethargy and, laziness and all these types of things. Absence of vanity. The opposite of that is vanity. Conceit. Self-centeredness. Being all consumed with me, me, me. Sincerity. The opposite of sincerity. If sincerity is not being practiced, then insincerity is being practiced. And don't you all just love when you meet an insincere person? Yeah. And have you ever felt like an insincere person? Don't you just love that feeling? No, of course not. But you love and appreciate sincerity when you experience it within yourself or another, because it feels good. It feels healthy. Simplicity. To be unnecessarily complicated. Veracity. To be weak-minded. Equanimity. Opinionated. All of the opposites will come into play if these are tossed off to the side. And then where will we be? When the opposites take over, which they are already taking over, where will we be left? We'll be left in a deeper place of fear, even more deeply set than it already is. Now, a lot of you in here are younger than I am, but some of you are kind of getting close to my age. I'm 60. So if you're close to that, do you remember when we used to go for long walks away from home? Like, right? You weren't afraid to go for long walks. I used to walk to my middle school rather than take the bus. And it was like easily 5-6 miles, easily. You know, you just walk, you just go, right? You go explore the world. Do you do that now? Do you go for long walks outside and go explore the world? And yeah, is that a yes, JD, or are you agreeing?
Absolutely, I do.
Good.
Inner child is still in me. But
Good. And don't ever stifle that inner child. Don't ever. Because the moment that inner child gets stifled, we have to ask why. Why is the inner child being stifled right now? Why do I not want to go walk down my street? And then you're going to have an answer. And the answer is going to be, because I don't want to see anybody. I don't want to get into an argument with anybody. I don't want to hear anybody's drama. I'm just going to stay here where I'm safe and stagnate. Yeah. Isn't that what happens when something stays in one place too long, when it's not supposed to? It stagnates. So get out. Go. Reclaim this world in honor of the ethics. Don't let the unethical steal from you the experience of this life with the goodness that can mean, the fullness that it can bring. The only people who are going to change the flow of energy in the world is us. Each one of us. Each person who is alive in this world. So by us, I mean a lot. All of us. But there's never going to be a time where all 8 billion people, which is like, what are we, at 8.6 billion now or something like that? It's a crazy number. There's never going to be a time when every single person is on the same page. It's impossible. It will never happen. However, you can get pockets of people. They're called, if in the spiritual realm, it's called a sangha, like-minded individuals. And that's who you travel around with. That's who you invite to go out for a walk. That's who you sit down and talk to. You don't talk to the person who's going to tell you how horrible you are and how horrible the world is and why you should lock yourself up in your room and never come out again. You want to sit down and talk to the people who are going to say, you got to get out in the sunshine. Let's both go out. We'll do it together. We'll support each other. Spiritual bypassing doesn't really have that support in place. It may sound like it's being offered, but ultimately, there's an ulterior motive. So it's not really. And as a matter of fact, oftentimes when some type of support is offered, it's coming from a place of superiority and not from a place of, I get you, because I'm just as scared as you are, just as lonely as you are, just as intimidated as you are, just as concerned as you are. Maybe together we can find a solution. Does that make sense? Yeah. So spirituality versus, the spiritual bypassing stuff that's going on. Spirituality, those 18 itties. Focus your day, focus your efforts on cultivating those in yourself. Compassionately call yourself on it when you're behaving against them, when you're behaving in the opposite. You don't have to denigrate yourself. I'm a bad person, I failed again. No, that's BS. Stop doing that to yourself. You're not a bad person because you're having a tough time. No. Life is tough. It just is. And that's part of the flavor of it, Because if life wasn't difficult, we wouldn't have such a profound appreciation for the easier moments. We would just take them for granted. So appreciate the difficult moments, including the ones where you have to call yourself on your own stuff. Don't be afraid to do that. It's the fastest way through it. Just acknowledge, well, okay, I guess I was being a little opinionated there. I guess I was being jealous. I was being envious. I was being whatever I was being. And now that I've looked at that, now that I've called it what it is, suddenly it loses its power. It still has some power, but it loses the bulk of it. It's like the monster in the closet. I think I've shared that with most of you. When I was a little girl, I was deathly afraid of my walk-in closet. I shared a room with my mother. She was a single mom. We lived with my grandmother, and my brother got his own room. So my grandmother's room was downstairs, my brother was across the hall, and my mother and I shared a room. And I was probably, I don't even know, like 7 years old at this time or something like that. I had to be around Alo's age. And my mother was a nurse in the ER, and she worked a lot of nights. So a lot of nights she would, be gone, and my grandmother would be downstairs, and she'd be the one watching us. And so my walk-in closet always made weird noises. And most of the time it didn't bother me. But this one night, I was having difficulty sleeping, and there was this noise coming from the closet that sounded like a rapping on the wall, like a knocking sound. And I had wild imagination as a child, and I had myself talked into believing that there was some big, ugly monster in that closet just waiting to get me. And I was up on my little bed, and I was putting the blankets under my feet and tucking them in all, because the blanket is, that's your armor. The monsters can't get through the blanket. So it had to be all set with the blanket. And it's storming outside. So that's like adding to it, because now there's like lightning and thunder and this rapping noise coming from the closet, And so there's a reason I'm telling you this. So all of a sudden, the noise in the closet gets louder, and I guess the thunder must have went at whatever it was. It threw me for a loop, and I started screaming bloody murder, screaming at the top of my lungs. My grandmother comes running up the stairs. So she's like in the back of the house in her room. She's got to come all the way through the bottom of the house, up the stairs. What's the matter? Are you okay? What's going on? And I'm sitting there with my blanket. I'm like, there's something in the closet that's going to get me. And she just, you could see on her face that she was both enamored by this and irritated. I was probably trying not to laugh, because of the ridiculousness of it. But my grandmother, she had a very compassionate streak in her. So she came over and she sat on my bed and she said, tell me about it, And so I was like, no, I don't want to talk about it. It's in there. I don't want to can I leave my light on? You can't leave your light on when you're going to sleep. She's trying to walk me through this. So finally, she says, take my hand. And I went, nope. And she went, yes. And now my grandmother had a compassionate streak, but she also had a really disciplined streak. So you did not tell her no if she told you to do something. So she takes my hand and she says, come with me. And I'm like, no. And so she got me to go over to the door. She put my hand on the doorknob. And there's this, and I'm sorry, I was raised Catholic, so I feel like I can say this. And it was also my experience. There was this picture of Jesus Christ on the closet door, the kind that the eyes followed you. Okay, I didn't need to see that in that moment, but I did. And so I'm shaken, and I'm like all kind of nervous. And she puts my hand on the doorknob and she helps me turn the doorknob. And I'm starting to like scream, like, no, don't open the door. She opens the door, or I open the door with her help. She throws the light on, and guess what? There's nothing there. There's nothing there. There's a hanger hanging on the far end of the closet against the exterior wall of the house, and there's a wicked draft. And the hanger is banging up against the wall. Now, my grandmother, feeling very good about herself, says, now that you know the truth, you can go back and get some rest. Now go to sleep. I love you. She goes downstairs. My grandmother always told me she loved me. She was sweet that way. Mom, not so much. I love her too. So that's what this is all like, right? That's where we're coming from in life. We're all running from the monster in the closet. We're all running from the thing that we haven't stopped to look at. We're running from our jealousy. We're running from our anger. We're running from our hate. We're running from our disappointment. We're running from our judgmentalism. We're running and we're trying to find something more attractive, something less intimidating, something more appropriate. And so we say, spirituality, it is. And so we talk ourselves into thinking that we already fit the criteria, and we begin to ignore all of those other qualities that we have very present in ourself, and so we don't bother doing the work there. So now what we have to do is turn ourselves back around. The 18 Ittis tells us exactly what to look for. Turn ourselves back around and say, okay, anger, come on over here. We got some work to do. Okay, jealousy, let's sit down. We got to go over this. We got to look at this. We have to pull the weed from the root, or the weed grows back. And we have lots of weeds, so we know that, don't we, Jenna? Don't we, Savox? Yes, we do. Yeah. So we have to pull the weed from the root. So that means that we have to really get into ourselves. And at that first level, it's the practice of svadhyaya. It's the practice of self-study. You got to look at yourself honestly, make the changes in yourself, and don't worry about what your husband or your wife or your children or your friends or your boyfriend or your girlfriend are going to say. What does it matter? They're not living in your body. They're not having the thoughts that you're having, the conflict that you're having. They don't necessarily have to understand why you are committing yourself to self-study. And who knows, if you just do it and don't look for their approval, maybe someday they'll be inspired to just do it too. But if you look for their approval, if you go to them and say, look, this is what I'm doing. I got involved in this yoga ashram. Y'all can hear the rest of that conversation already, can't you? Yeah. So don't do that. Don't look for approval in that way. You're not hiding what you're doing. It's going to be obvious. You're just not asking for their permission to become the best version of yourself. You're just not asking for their permission. You don't have to. It's not necessary. That's your dharma, not theirs. Their dharma is for them to become the best version of themselves. And as a little bit of an aside, as you're doing the work of becoming the best version of yourself, you know, ethics and all that other wonderful stuff, don't use that as a weapon against them or anybody because you think that they're not doing the work. Because just because you don't see it doesn't mean it isn't happening. Just because you don't see it. I had a student who several years ago came up and said, why don't you ever practice with us? Yeah. Don't you like to practice yoga? Like the asana? You know, you should try coming to class once in a while. So I said to them, just because you don't see it doesn't mean it isn't happening. I don't practice with students in the class because I tend to be more of a distraction than anything else when I'm in there. Seriously, you know. So I don't want to do that. People will turn around and they'll watch and they'll look and they'll try to do whatever it is that I'm doing. And I'm like, I don't want to be that distraction to people. So I have my own private practice. And yoga teaches this also. It's actually in the scriptures, and it states that the yogi should practice privately, not make a spectacle of themselves. Humility, right? Humility. So you teach to the group, and you don't teach to a group of students so that you hope that they stay forever in that class. You teach to students in such a way that hopefully one day they have a home practice. And hopefully one day they don't need to come to class. They come because they want to. But they don't need to. because their practice is well established in the privacy of their own home. And that is really what every teacher should strive for, is to see the independence grow in their students. And not the attachment, the unhealthy attachment. Yeah. Oh, questions, reflections. This one really came out of the ethers. Yes, JD.
Speaking of the ethers, thank you very much, Swamini. But when you're saying, like, when you're living a hard life and doing the hard work, and you come into these times of ease or peace, and for some it may not actually be comfortable to be in that
Totally.
space. How do you recommend overcoming the fear of being where we should be?
That's so much more common than what you might think. Also, we become what's the word I'm looking for? Indoctrinated into a certain way of being. And if all we've ever had is trauma, whether self-induced or brought about by the outside world, then that tends to be what we expect. So it really takes quite the feat of inner strength, determination, discernment, to be able to say no more and follow through with it. Because when you say no more, you do mean it. It's just that the other voice that's saying more means it more. Or they're louder, that voice is louder. So so we need to empower the inner voice that's saying no more. We need to empower that voice to become louder within us. Loud in regard to it being an expression in our behavior, in our decision making. And as difficult as it is, we have to do the things that are outside of our comfort zone. We need to get out of our comfort zone. The comfort zone for some might be, instead of going out and socializing with friends and going and joining a study group for the Bhagavad Gita or a chanting community or something like that, they might have the tendency instead to stay home and watch reruns on Netflix. Because, number one, it's a lot of effort and they're tired. So that's a lesson right there, right? It's a lot of effort and they're tired. So what should they do? Test time, quiz. What should they do?
Rest.
They should get more rest. They should regulate their energetics more appropriately so that they do have some energy, so that they can feel good about getting up and going out. But in the meantime, they should still go join a study group. Go to your class. Get up and go to your harmonium. Go chant, So that happens. And then the other things that they go through are, well, it's not like they don't have, this is not a conscious thought on their part, but if the subconscious could talk, it would be like, you're only going to have a nice time there. No one's going to be interested in hearing about your nice time. Because people like train wrecks. So maybe I should be a train wreck. Does that make sense? And like I said, it's not a conscious conversation you're having with yourself, but it is a subconscious conversation. It is a subconscious choice that's being made, that when I'm the train wreck, I'm perceived one way. And people are used to me that way. Maybe they're not used to me being, self-responsible and strong and discerning and decisive and smiling and happy. And maybe that freaks them out because they're not used to seeing me that way. And here's the crazy thing that the ego does. Because someone else is not capable in that moment, in that one moment out of a whole lot of moments of life, to see with generosity and gratitude your happiness in that moment, your joy in that moment, the radiance of your smile in that moment, then we say, there must be something wrong with me. I must be wrong for trying to improve myself. Maybe I should just be what they want me to be. They want me to be something else. So maybe I should just be that something else and forget about all this peace and happiness and love crap. Right? So there's this whole conflict that's going on inside of us. And this conflict is going on inside of all of us. Tell me, how many of you are not a people pleaser to some degree? Oh, yes, you are. Everybody is, without exception. You may not be a big people pleaser, but there will be times in your life where you will be worried if you said the wrong thing, if it was taken the wrong way, if you imposed, if you add the if there. There will be some point in time that you will feel that way. Fortunately, for some people, it's far less frequent than others. For some people, that's all they feel. Can you imagine feeling like an imposition most of the time? You know? But that's what that conflict leads to, isn't it? It leads to feeling like an imposition to yourself, an imposition to other people. You got to break through that wall and recognize that the struggle that you're going through is actually a very valuable struggle. And just like, women in the 1960s had a glass ceiling. Have you all heard of the glass ceiling theory? What was the glass ceiling? Somebody define it for me. What was the glass ceiling?
Where women could work their way up the professional ladder, up and up and up to a certain point, and they had these opportunities that maybe a generation before did not exist, but they could never break through the glass ceiling that was it was men at the very top.
And was that okay?
It's still here, though.
It's still here, but it was not okay. Would anybody disagree? Would anybody think it was okay? No, of course not. Anybody of a, we'll just call it rational mind, would not think that was okay. They would think, you need to break through that glass ceiling so you can reach your potential. Would you agree? Then why is it, if that's the truth, which I agree with you, I think that is absolutely the truth, why is it that when we have a friend, a family member, somebody in our circle who's trying to improve themselves, why do we put the freaking glass ceiling in their way? Don't you have a right to break through that also? And you need to, that's what that's what we all need to realize. We need to realize that we fight against certain glass ceilings, but we put other ones in place. And sometimes we put them in place for ourselves. And we say, well, you all don't seem to like the happier, more peaceful version of me, so here, I'm just going to put this little glass ceiling right here, and I'll just stay here for you. I'll stay here because it's more comfortable than breaking through. Breakthrough. Definitely breakthrough. Because you won't know what's waiting there for you until you do. Yeah. Thank you for answering that too, by the way. Yeah. It's cool. Some people are very not really concerned at all about people pleasing. It's still there. It's there for all of us. But so how does that sound? Does that make sense? Yeah. It ain't easy. So much easier to spiritually bypass. Just so much easier. But let's not, shall we? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Any other questions or reflections? Well, we're always calling ourselves on it, aren't we?
It gets old after a while sometimes. To not just that balance between accepting yourself for who you are and where you're at versus striving for growth and improvement and becoming who you're intended to be. And sometimes that's the teeter-tots, the seesaw that becomes frustrating.
Mm-hmm. And what if I said to you that they're not two different things? We think they are, and we do. And I'm really glad that you said that, because we do think they are. We're like, well, I'm accepting myself. And it kind of, for some people, some of the time, it might become a little bit of an excuse. I'm accepting myself. But what if accepting yourself is not meant to keep you stuck in one place? That you have to accept yourself as you are in order to do the work. You can't do the work if you're not accepting yourself. So one naturally follows the other. You can't have self-acceptance without change. If you are truly accepting yourself, you're going to find something that you need to brush up on.
So it's just a constant cycle.
It's a constant cycle.
Yeah.
That's all, yeah. It's a constant cycle. And we'll do well by ourselves if we acknowledge that and accept it, you know? That of course there's going to be work to do, because the work follows naturally the observation. You go out into the garden and you see a weed. I accept the weed is there. Yeah. Yeah. You pull the weed. Yeah. Okay, I know some people don't pull weeds. I got it. But, you know. And if you don't pull the weeds, sometimes you end up with a 6-foot-tall monstrosity that's, you know, cutting off the circulation of your other plants. We planted tansy in the garden several years ago. I think like the first year we were here. And it grew into a monstrosity. And so we finally took it out, and it kept popping back up. We took it out again and again and again. And then we finally got rid of the original plant. And then for 4 or 5 years, all over the place, the little babies, because the seeds were dormant for some time, you know. And so it would just be, you know, like part of my daily practice. Go out there and just pull them, pull, and be like, it's okay, you're just going back to the earth now, you know. But oh my gosh, those weeds, you have to watch them because they multiply. They're like Rakta Bija in that way, right? For those of you who know the Durga story and the Rakta Bija demon. He is a demon who, in battle, if a drop of his blood touches the earth, 10,000 more of him come up. Right? So is he really like a demon, you know, like in a Freddy Krueger movie or something? No, maybe, I don't know. But what's more important to us is that it's desire, it's behavior tendencies, its beliefs, that these things are self-replicating. And if you're not mindful, pretty soon you'll be tangled up in them. So always self-study. Always, always. It does get monotonous at times. But just remind yourself it's a natural part of life, and it's necessary to break through the glass ceiling that you put over your own head. And isn't it fun? Because like you put that glass ceiling over your own head so easily, like it just slid right into place. And yet the only way out of it is to break through it. You got to like, it's just such, it's painful to break out of it. Because all this other stuff becomes so second nature to us, you know. Do a time check. Okay, I'm past time. Don't let me ramble like that. Let's sit nice and tall and close the eyes. Draw the hands together in front of the heart. We'll lift our voices in one Om, taking a breath in. Om Shri Matre Namaha.